Good afternoon. Welcome to all of you who are attending this Zoom presentation. It's the first Zoom presentation that the Hermanus History Society has done. Our speaker, as you know, is the chairperson of the History Society, Angela Heslop. She has had that position since 2012. Angela is the founding chairperson of the Hermanus History Society, but her involvement in Hermanus history goes back before 2012, when the society was established. She became friendly with the well-known historian of Hermanus, Essye du Toit, and in fact worked with Essye du Toit on some of the history books of Hermanus that du Toit wrote. These are known as Hermanus Stories 1, Hermanus Stories 2, and Hermanus Stories 3. If you're not familiar with those books, I suggest that you obtain them. The best source is the Book Cottage, and read them, as they contain a vast amount of information about the history of the town. Angela worked with Essye du Toit also on persuading the municipality to pay some attention to the history of the town. Previous municipalities of Hermanus, under various names, had not paid much attention to the history of the town. And in fact, while they were in office, many of the historical monuments that we might have today were destroyed in the name of development. However, Angela persuaded the Overstrand municipality, which came into office in the year 2000, to pay more attention to history. And working with Essye and others, they designed and got the municipality to erect a history board at the history site in Marine Drive. A second board was eventually erected at Dichang along the cliff path. She also has persuaded the municipality to erect several plaques at particular places of historical interest. For instance, the Hoyskopi plaque, which is near the parking lot for the United Church, and others. She, in addition to her work in history, Angela has also been very active in the health aspects of Hermanus. She worked in various capacities for preservation of health in Mount Pleasant and in Reliefler, and became familiar with the history of both of those areas while she was working there as a health practitioner. She is also currently the chairperson of the Red Cross in Hermanus. However, today she is not speaking to us about Hermanus, but speaking to us on quite a different topic, coming from a different country altogether, namely Botswana. Angela spent part of her childhood in what was then the Bechuanaland Protectorate, and it is from this experience that I'm inviting her to speak to us today on the following topic: how a message in a bottle and a child's photos taken in Bechuanaland in the 1950s became history. Angela, over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will repeat the title, How a Message in a Bottle and a Child's Photos Taken in Bechuanaland in the 1950s Became History. My introduction is this. I think memories are very important, and there are three major processes involved in memory: encoding, understanding, storage, and retrieval. And I'm obviously going to expand on that as the presentation goes along. And we, with others, that is my sister and I, started researching an episode of family history in Bechuanaland Protectorate in Botswana. There were two families involved: the Cordias, who owned that farm, one farm, Bonnington Farm, which you see below, from 1944, and the Ryans, and my maiden name is Ryan. The Cordias and the Ryans were in Gaborone in the 1950s. In 2014, my sister and I had an invitation from the Botswana National Museum to try and assist them with an outdoor museum on the farm site. So I will take you through that process, but in a small way, put it into a historical context. Clearly, the history of Bechuanaland Protectorate is pretty complex, but there are key people and key situations that occurred. So to start with the time capsule, which is what the museum in Gaborone called it, certainly wasn't a bottle as such. It was buried by Dan Cordia, a farmer in Bechuanaland in 1953, and it was found in 2006. I want to share with you some of the content of that paper, which I obviously had to type out again, which was contained in the capsule. So this is some of the text. It was less than 2 pages, written in his grammar and in his writing. He said, "My name is Daniel Henry LaCordia, and I live on the farm with my wife, Rena. We have 4 daughters, Yvonne, Deirdre, and Mfanwe. I got that, that's funny. I got that wrong, Yvonne, age 7, and 1 son, Danny Boy. I knew them all. The next statement is, we are running on the Willow Dam. We are running ducks on the Willow Dam behind the house. The dam was last dry in 1933. They grew groundnuts, and I am at the moment building a soil and am hoping to feed 200 baby beef. I paid £1.17 per Morgan, but wouldn't take 5 Morgan now. I have sunk 7 boreholes and built 8 dams. I have cleared 400 acres of land. General Eisenhower, President-elect, USA. Mr. Churchill is Premier of Britain. Dr. Milan is Prime Minister of the Union. I was born in 1908, and so I'm 44 years of age. May God bless you and all others who are now living on my old farm." That was the last sentence of this written document that he had in the time capsule. It conveys, because not all of it is here, it conveys a certain level of anxiety and fear about the future. I'm not going to discuss these particular photos at this moment, but the other aspect of memories being recalled are my photos with the Brownie Camera. In 1954, I was about 10, and that's a camera. Not that I have it today, but that's the one from the web. And I'll tell you a little bit about these photographs later. But there were probably about 20 or 30 photographs that I had stored and was able to use on this occasion, 214. So I'd like now to enter into kind of story which tells you about the links between our family, South Africa, Bechuanaland in particular, and our memories and the LaCordia memories, and how this came to be used potentially in the museum in Gaborone. Chapter 1, my parents left India, and so did I. By the Suez Canal was open at the time. We left India in 1947 because of the partition. England was in a post-war state, and my father was restless, and he got an appointment to the Colonial Service in the British Protectorates. This included Swaziland, Bechuanaland Protectorate. Places in Bechuanaland Protectorate were Mount Francistown, Gaborone. Mafeking was the capital at the time, and was for quite a long time, in Bechuanaland, and then the respective British embassies, which were at that time in Pretoria and Cape Town. A little picture of Bechuanaland, not at all comprehensive, but just a timeline. There was evidence of intermittent human occupation on an immense time span. The ancestral San Bushmen, 4,500 years. I don't know the dates, but there were black farmers. 1,000 years ago, new farming people from the east. And then 1600 Bechuana tribe. And the tribe story is quite complex, so you'd have to investigate further if you're interested. And in 1900, the missionaries. 1836, Great Trek in Afrikaners that influenced Bechuanaland. In 1885, areas south of Molopololi was declared a British territory. Emphasis was the south. Now I'm just going to touch on key people that had some impact on Bechuanaland. The first being David Livingston, the Scottish physician, pioneer Christian missionary with the London Missionary Society and explorer in Africa, and one of the most popular British heroes in the late 19th century. I mean, he was an extraordinary man, and he actually lived south of Bechuanaland, south of Gaborone, Molopololi, and there's still stones in the area of the home that he and his wife shared. I'd like to touch on Mary Moffat, his wife. There's a really important book which is in our library called Looking for Mrs. Livingston by Julie Davidson. She doesn't feature at all, no surprise, in the 19th century. They had 4 children and she had a really, really tough life exploring right up to the Zambezi. He was, or rather his heart was buried in Westminster Abbey and her body was put somewhere along the Zambezi River. But he made an impact, and so did she. Now, Cecil John Rhodes, a controversial person, to say the least. He was a British mining magnate. One of Rhodes' greatest dreams was a ribbon of red, which you can see what this cartoon picture shows, demarcating British territory, which would cross the whole of Africa from South Africa to Egypt. Part of this vision was his desire to construct a Cape to Cairo railway, one of his most famous projects. As you know, that wasn't achieved, and the Jameson raid got in the way. I rather like this comment because I think it's so quintessentially British. Remember that you are an Englishman and have consequently won first prize in the lottery of life. So we're now in chapter 2. My father is district commissioner of Gaborone, but he was a district commissioner from 1949 to 1960. So as I indicated, this is post-war England, and he's in various places, but the one we're focusing on is Bechuanaland. Whether I took this photograph, I shouldn't think so, but I took most of the others. This is life, colonial life at the time. On the left-hand side, we got 4 children gobbling watermelon by the river. The second picture on the left, is a club that my father built with another district commissioner. And up here is a ride in a boat, catching fish, no doubt. I think we used to catch some bream. And my father chose to learn to be a pilot. And so we did toss about in the clouds in this little aeroplane, which I think the most fascinating thing for me was this aeroplane was housed on Gaborone Golf Course, which is now the airport today. And I don't have to tell you how busy Gaborone Airport is today, but there was just this little plane at that time. Swimming. And this is most of the family, and you'll see them a little closer in a minute. On the right, it was common for colonials to return to England, and this is our family, and my mother, the 3 girls in front of Table Mountain catching a Union Castle line to England. This is a map of the time, and my father penciled in his flights, which I have to this day, and a stamp of the time, which was certainly in use when I was a child, although it's a 1938 stamp. It's King George and, of course, cattle, Bechuanaland Protectorate. On the left-hand side, central to our discussion, is Dan Cordia and Rena, and these are their various children. And this is the beginning of their farmhouse, Bonnington Farmhouse, which you're going to see. Rennie was an energetic and lovely woman who used to run a typical store outside the farm on the main road, which we used to help with, and the various Africans to drop by to buy groceries or whatever else she supplied. And we, as children, had holidays on this farm because my parents went to England and we needed to go to school. And so we were left with the Cordias. And these are just scenes of us. That's me, and that's my sister. That's my little sister. And as usual, swimming. And this is the Willow Dam, which I'll come to talk about a little bit later. One of the family's weddings and a tennis court. The farm was quite well off. It had a tennis court. I think that's probably where I learned a bit of tennis, and a swimming pool, which you'll see evidence of later. So that kind of shows you the kind of holidays that we had on the farm, and the people and the activities were there. However, in chapter 3, the background to the museum seeking our assistance. They were adopting a monument strategy at the time and were really quite busy. I wasn't that clued up as to how many museums were around at the time. The time capsule of Dan Cordia, the archaeologist, had found, I think, his name is Philip Segadaka, and he invited Danny, the son of Dan Cordia, to come to the farm because that was his first knowledge of the farm and of that history of Bonnington Farm. Danny did quite a lot of work with Philip. However, sadly, he was run over by a train in Fishel, so he was not able to complete his work. And for some reason, his siblings, his sisters, were not interested in continuing to help. And then my sister's book, that's the pair of us. It's a sad book. However, it is Memories of an African Child, and it features Bechuanaland. So Philip had also got to know of this book, so he invited Carolyn, and I accompanied her to Gaborone. So we stayed at the hotel for one night, the Grand Palm, which was opposite Bonnington Farm. I don't know when when this hotel was built, but for me, it was very interesting because Carolyn and I shared a room, and that night I opened the curtains. I said, "Good heavens, the Willow Dam! It's up there. What's it doing out there inside the hotel? What a cheek!" And because obviously our memories were considerable of this dam, because we used to. I don't know that we swam, and there's certainly no crocodiles. But there were ducks, as Dan Cordia mentioned, and we had a boat, and I suppose we might have fished. It was pretty rough, but the Grand Palm had smartened it up, and I just recognized it, and that's, I think, is the fun of memories. So the curators of the museum asked us to walk around the farm with them and to track what was there before. It is the farm, Bonnington Farm, today is not demolished as such, but it's in pretty bad condition. But the imprints are clear because there's still a fair amount of building remaining. This is Willow Dam on the left, and these are us moving around, talking to them. I have a good memory for visual memory for these sorts of things, so I could take them. And Carolyn is younger, so we could take them right through the house and talk about memories or circumstances within each of the rooms. At the end of the farmhouse, there are 2 silos. They weren't decorated during our childhood, but that was the beginning of the museum plan. So they decorated the silos. My memory of the silos was that we used to play around them, and they had a very strong smell of the storage, but not unpleasant. That's the sitting room on the right, and you can see a kind of fireplace. This took a few hours, but it was interesting. That's the swimming pool, rather smart, and as you can see in the distance, that's the length almost of the farm. Quite a long building. I don't know anything about how he decided on the plans, etc. And obviously we did a lot of swimming, but we swam more in dams. And in the distance, you can see quite a lot of the farm, and these are two of our curators at the end of our walk. So new visitors to an old garden. Today, the silos today, a bit more close, and I did get this off the website rather than the picture that I'd taken earlier. And so working with the museum, there was meetings, sharing ideas. We spent quite a lot of time with the press, and if we were in the Catholic Hall, you would have access to that material, because I obviously have all the press cuttings. And my photos I put on a memory stick. And I suppose the whole process took about 4 or 5 days. We also did a presentation at the university, and they took us to our old home, and we generally explored. So chapter 4, the situation in the 60s. After 81 years of protection, the British government put in very little. That's well known. The economy was largely undeveloped. Modern capital of Gaborone had to be built up from scratch to house the new government. Bechuanaland was counted as one of the poorest countries in the world. So our experience, all right, there was a farm, and we certainly ate, and we had cattle and so on and so forth. So I don't remember poverty, but as a piece of land, or sorry, as a country, it certainly was poor generally. And then the wind of change. You're probably all familiar with this talk, or know of it. On the 3rd of February in 1960, Harold Macmillan gave a significant address to the Parliament in Cape Town. I attended with my father, because we were in Cape Town at the time. The speech related mainly to the separation of Britain from its South African colonies, but it also referred to discontent with the system of apartheid and held positive political results for the British government. Independence is 1966. On the left is Serenity Karma, and on the right is the woman he married, Ruth Karma, and 2 of the children. Ian Karma, the eldest son, I think, became president until a few years back when he retired. So this is a picture of the couple in Bechuanaland. However, so Serenity Karma, whilst she was heir to the chief painter of Bangamwato tribe, in 1948, the marriage to Ruth Williams caused a storm. The Labour government refused to recognise him. 1950, and he had done his law degree, I think, at Oxford University. 1950, back to London, back to England, having spent a little time in Bechuanaland, and Bechuanaland weren't that keen on the marriage either. 1956, he returned to Bechuanaland Protectorate. He was knighted, and he was the first Prime Minister of Bechuanaland Protectorate, Botswana. 1966 was independence. He died in 1980, and Ruth died in 2002, spent much of her time working for the Red Cross. So he was a very important person, and he came from a background of Karma kings, none of which I know too much about, but he did a distinguished, played a distinguished role in the development of Bechuanaland. There's something I wanted to say about Serenity Karma, maybe it'll come back to me. But they suffered. Oh, yes. There is, I also have various obituaries about Serenity and Ruth, in fact. But in addition to that, I strongly recommend the book, the movie about this marriage. I think it was, from my point of view, got the sort of essence of Bechuanaland as I remembered as a child. Serenity Karma, speaking at the time of independence from Britain in 1966, said these, I think, somewhat relevant words to what we are trying to discuss. It should now be our intention to write Sorry, it should now be our intention to try to retrieve what we can of our past. We should write our own history books to prove that we did have a past, and that it was a past that was just as worth writing and learning about as any other. We must do this for the simple reason that a nation without a past is a lost nation, and a people without a past is a people without a soul. So, as I indicated, Serenity was there at a very important time from 1966 onwards. My father certainly met him earlier, but I never met him. But these are key facts about Botswana, a Botswana that progressed steadily from 1966. It is landlocked, it has no rivers and the famous Okavango Delta, Kalahari Desert with woodland and other vegetation, areas mostly flat, 561, 800 square meters, semi-arid, one rainy season and very hot. The capital is Gaborone. Population, and I'm not talking 214, 1.6. Language, Setswana and English. Religions, Christian, Muslim, ancestral. Currency, the pula. Is a parliamentary democracy. Diamonds have played a significant role, as has coal and now tourism. This is Gaborone today, a busy capital, quite attractive. These are three statues of previous kings done in Korea, actually, and made out of brass, I think, I'm not sure, but huge. And this is just an example of quite a colourful Ministry of Environment, Wildlife and Tourism in Gaborone today, and I particularly like this advertisement. Black stays black, white stays white for longer. Guess what? Nivea cream. So our heritage, cultural heritage is the legacy of cultural resources and intangible attributes of a group or society that is inherited from past generations. So from my point of view, our heritage is about remembering, documenting, communicating, valuing, and identifying. So I expect some of you are wondering what happened to this museum, so I better tell the truth. Today, the museum has not developed. What we have of the museum is the two silos. There were four originally. I have written to all the key people in Botswana, and I no doubt will hear the answer. There may be many reasons why it didn't develop. Money may be one. My sister isn't entirely surprised, but they're a little bit disappointed. So that may answer your question. However, the values, universally all holidays produce memories, good and bad. Our personal holiday memories, which were colonial, recaptured in a book form and gained a public audience, namely my sister's book. Our memories from the colonial past were discovered and seem to be valued in post-colonial settings. So the people, of which there must have been 15 or 20 at the museum, and we worked a little bit at the university, the Botswana people are amazing. They engage with you, they talk to you, they're seemingly very interested in the past, which they may have had some attitudes towards, but I never saw or heard anything unpleasant. It was always an interesting exchange. We all have happy memories. Perhaps these local memories are worth recording in some form or other, such as our case in Botswana. That is night 4, where we stayed. Not in that, we stayed outside Gaborone. And I'd like to acknowledge my sister, Elsie Brink and Robin, for assistance with what was a somewhat different presentation initially, but I've turned it around in terms of exploring the possibilities and encouraging us, one another, to keep records, store memories, communicate memories, and store and label photographs. Because I remember my parents gave me a hat box full of photographs, but unless you recognize one or two people, there was nothing you could do to unpick what was in that box. So I strongly commend us all to store our memories and do something with our memories. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. Can I kick off with a couple of comments and questions, and then other people may come in? I wanted to ask you, you partially answered it, but I'd like to know more about what did you see as the motivation when you were originally approached by the Botswana authorities to participate in this project? What was their motivation? Was it related to what Serenity Karma said about the past? Did they refer to that at all? Or were there any lingering anti-colonial feelings that you detected when you first met them?
To answer the last question first, none whatsoever. And I think we had collaboration connections with probably 20 to 25 people, whether it was the museum or the university. The person that drove this was Philip Sigadaka, who was the archaeologist. Whether he actually dug up the time capsule, I don't know. But he was the one that drove it and worked in the museum with this group of people. They seemed very interested at the time with this concept of an outdoor museum turning this farm into something. We never saw any plans. They just collected some items, and obviously the time capsule, my sister's book, the son, Danny's information, and the photographs were all shared. I'm not. I got a letter, email quite quickly back from the professor of the Botswana Society, and he told me who to get in touch with about this museum, and it seems that it'll all come under the Directorate of Museums in Botswana. So maybe I will find out some information, Robin, but at the moment, it could have been money, it could have been anything. I never heard about Serenity Karma's quote while I was with the people. In fact, I don't even recall his name being mentioned at the time.
And a second question I wanted to ask was, what was the effect on you, on your own personal development of the time spent in then Bechuanaland? I mean, is it just an episode amongst many episodes, or is there some, and wouldn't have gone any further if people hadn't approached you to participate, or does it feature in any particular way in the formation of your own self as you are now?
I spent in total a decade in 4 places in Bechuanaland Protectorate. I have always loved it, and I have returned maybe twice, 2 or 3 times. About my development, apart from spelling Dettol in Francistown and thinking I might like to be a nurse, which was, I was about 8, I think, and I was often at boarding school, well, always at boarding school, backwards and forwards. So it was a fairly mobile kind of existence. And on balance, I value it. If you read my sister's book, she didn't value it, and she was pretty critical of colonial life then. But then, of course, she was reflecting back when she wrote it. No, I think I'm not sure that I can really think too much about the development, except that I valued my time there, but I was itinerant. I was always backwards and forwards, and so some of it was about survival. And of course, there are other stories, but they're not ones that I would discuss here. Because I was at 11 schools. So, I mean, I was in 4 schools in 2 years. So that means you're pretty mobile. So one development might be that one's fairly flexible and somewhat resilient. But I can't say Bechuanaland Protectorate exclusively. It was the circumstance.
Angela, as you know, I grew up in what was then Rhodesia, and when I came down to the Cape to university for 5 years on the trot, 4 times a year. I traveled up and down Bechuanaland. So I have physical memories of the landscape and passing up and down. And I must say, when you're having passed through the Northern Cape going home, to wake up in the morning to what was Rhodesian bush as you entered Bechuanaland was always a lifting of the spirits. I find the thought of 11 schools absolutely appalling. I mean, I went to boarding school and I went to 1 primary school and 1 high school. So I think that must have been very challenging, and 4 schools in 2 years, unthinkable. So I'm surprised that you've grown up to be such a sane person. Well done.
Thank you, Letitia.
I'd like to ask a question. From your personal experience, what impact did Ruth Karma have on the country?
That's a good question. First of all, I'd never met her, but a friend of mine from school in Johannesburg knew her very closely. I think, first of all, I think the couple experienced a most extraordinary time, and people were cruel, and her own family were rather cruel to her initially. So I think she was a brave woman, but a very stable woman, because it's reasonably well known that Serenity Karma was fairly dependent on alcohol, even though he was a very accomplished leader. But I suspect she was, as I hadn't met her, but from what I've learned about her from other people, she was a very stable, strong, caring woman who I understand the local people came to love and care about. So I suspect someone rather special. Yeah.
But she kept out of politics, didn't she? Very clearly.
Yes.
She never intruded on the political sphere at all.
No, no. But she was there. And I mean, to have survived what I've read about or seen, you know, she must have been a fairly stable, important source of support to Serenity. And of course, they had children.
Angela, we
Yes,
lived
Emily?
in Gaborone from 1997 to the year 2000. What I find quite fascinating is that the pula is always much stronger than the rand. And would you know why?
No, I wouldn't. In my next life, I'm going to be an economist. But I have no idea. Maybe someone in the audience knows. But of course, as a country, it has been hugely successful since '66.
Yes.
So, and they maybe managed to make their economy sound and safe. I have no idea. I can't answer the question. Can anybody else
Thank you.
comment on that?
Well, it's generally believed that they managed the discovery of diamonds in a positive way. I mean, all too often, economists refer to the natural resource curse, that a country that discovers an abundant natural resource proceeds to squander this on grandiose projects and corruption of politicians. And Botswana generally has the reputation, in conjunction with De Beers, of course, of managing the wealth that has accrued from diamonds in an intelligent way, and investing in particular types of infrastructure and other elements of their own economy. And probably that, plus the fact that they have 3 important natural reserves, two important natural reserves and 1 natural consequence, that they have the diamonds, they have coal, that they've always had cattle, and they've established decent relationships with the European Union for the export of meat, and they're managing tourism in an intelligent way. Although I read very recently of some very troubling rumors about developments in the Okavango in order to promote additional tourism and also looking for oil. But up until now, they have the reputation, unlike Nigeria, say, which went straight down the tubes once oil was discovered, that they have managed a resource intelligently, and that undoubtedly is what underpins the value of their currency. And why, we are not managing our natural resources intelligently, and therefore why our rand is considerably weaker than the pula.
Yeah.
There's one on chat which I will read to people. This is from Marinda. I was born and bred in Botswana. My family were farmers. My brothers still farm there, and I still have many cousins there. As children, we went to boarding school in Mafeking. This is Marinda Vilmans, who's also on the committee. Well, Angela, on behalf of the History Society, for which you've done so much, thank you very much for an very interesting presentation and for filling it out with observations of your own. Obviously, it's an element amongst several that make up your life, but it's interesting and it's useful for those of us the rest of us to think that there may be elements of our own lives which come into historical perspective at some time. And it's a good idea to be prepared with visual evidence and with organized memories if those elements of your life do come to the fore and someone's looking for historical input at some time. And you've obviously taken advantage of the opportunity that presented itself. So thank you very much. And thanks to all of those who attended. And I bid you all good afternoon and goodbye.